like to welcome people back onto our Purple Quarter podcast. And I'm really excited to introduce David Glick on this podcast series. Thank you so much, David, for managing to come on to this podcast. It's really late in the evening for you. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So just so that the audiences are aware of David, you're a physicist who moved into engineering. You've been 19 tall years in Amazon and then moved on. Right now, you're a CTO at Flexe. Amazing journey. When I did have a look at your profile, or if anyone wants to have a look at your profile, one thing that really comes to my mind is you've actually seen the entire supply chain change. 1998 to now, you would have probably seen so much that most of us are not aware of. So I'd like to pick your brains and ask you, how has the entire warehouse management changed? How has the fulfillment that we saw so much talk about has happened for the entire world? Could you please give us some inroad about it?
Yeah, it's actually interesting because in 1998, there was no such thing as a fulfillment center. We called them distribution centers at Amazon, and it wasn't cool to work in the fulfillment center or the distribution center. I was a PM, project manager in the IT group. We called it SNOC, the Systems and Networking Operations Center, and everybody wanted to work on the website, and all the top tier PMs got to work on the website, and I got sent to the warehouse. Mm-hmm. And I actually liked it because they loved the fact that they were getting attention, and it also. I was a physicist, or I am a physicist, and the physical goods that you're moving and actually doing stuff was really cool. And so, fast forward 20 years, all of a sudden logistics is cool and fulfillment is cool. And so that's an exciting and sort of serendipitous point in my career that, I went from something where I got stuck in the warehouse, and now it's sort of core to everybody's business, and supply chain is fantastic. One of the interesting things about the move from distribution to fulfillment is that when I joined in 98, and in 1999, 98 would barely survive, right? I ended up picking books in the middle of the night. And actually, funny story, my job was the diverter. We had, people putting stuff in boxes, and then we had 3 automated systems called SLAM, Scan, Label, Apply, Manifest. And one took the little boxes, and one put the medium boxes, and one put the large boxes. And my job was to divert the small boxes here, the medium boxes here. And so I was basically a sorter. So that's when I became passionate about automated sortation. And so it turned out 20 years later, or 15 years later, I was in charge of automated sortation at Amazon. But in 1999, we brought in a bunch of folks from Walmart. And Jeff said, we want the best logistics people in the world. I don't care how much it costs. We need the 10x capacity because we are not going to fail because we didn't have enough warehouse capacity and enough fulfillment capacity. And so the folks from Walmart came in and they brought in Pictolite and a full case sorter, tilt tray sorter, all these things. And it was the wrong system because it was perfect if you're picking full cases and sending them to stores, but we weren't doing any of that. And so we built this system and we sort of struggled through 1999. And then in the year 2000, 2001, 2002, we rewrote all of these systems by pulling them in-house because they were vendor software. And so we had to rewrite them to do fulfillment instead of distribution. And so that was sort of the transition from distribution to fulfillment.
Right.
And, many people don't know that. And it's a subtle difference, but super important.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. So if you, let's also look at your journey within Amazon. So you managed to move multiple roles, right? If I were to look at it, most people actually struggle to move between 2 roles at Amazon. That's what I'm told. From moving from a L6 to an L7, the bands that you have, and you've managed to do multiple of those. So what have the learnings been? Because were the principles there when you joined them, or were they created while you were part of the Amazon, the 14 leadership principles that you guys talk about?
Yeah, when I joined, there was core competencies and values and principles. And I actually was in a meeting, I think, or, maybe I just heard about it a bunch. There was a meeting. No, I was there. We were putting together the category leader handbook, which was the idea was we should programmatize what each of our retail category leaders did. And so one of my colleagues, Robbie Schwitzer, wrote this handbook for each of the category leaders. And the first 3 pages were, here's the values, and here's the principles, and here's the core competencies. And Jeff said, like, why do we have so many of these? Like, let's just make one of them. And that turned into a whole nother exercise of coming up with migrating and converging all 3 of those. And again, he's a genius, and like it was the smartest thing to do. I was on a podcast this morning, and we were talking about the leadership principles, and we were talking about being right a lot. Mm-hmm. And then we ended up talking about disagree and commit. And we went through about 5 of them, which were all very interrelated. And so super important. And so it wasn't true that they were there when I got there.
Sure. So these 14 principles, do you really know them like the back of your hand, or do you relate to just 1 or 2 of them that you think of? 14 is a lot.
That's right. When we were putting together our values at Flex, I sent my boss the link and said, hey, here's 14 good values. He's like, no, that's too many. We need 5 or 6. And, it turns out that if you walk around Seattle, the startups, many of the startups have very similar leadership principles to Amazon. And we want it to be different, which I think is important in a variety of ways. But, he's like, we'll never be able to remember all 14.
Sure.
And I said, well, I can remember them. And I don't know if I could name them all today, but I can name probably 9 of them off the top of my head. Mm-hmm. You do need to dive deep. Like whether you're at Amazon or elsewhere, you need to have a bias for action. You need to deliver results. Disagree and commit is super important. Thinking big, inventing, simplifying, hiring and develop the best. Those are all things we should do both at work and at home.
Sure.
I think I got 7 or 8 right there.
Right. So what is one principle that you live by, out of those 14, if you had to pick a favorite?
I think hire and develop the best is one that I'm super passionate about, because I think we talked about this before. Let me step back. I went from level 4 to level 10 at Amazon, and there's probably a half a dozen people who've done that. Mm-hmm. Tom Weiland went from level 1 to level 10, and Mike Bundy went from level 1 to level 8. But there's I know all of those people.
Sure.
Becky Ganser went from a temp picker to level 10. And so there's very few of us. But if you think about how that changes, one of my bosses was a woman named Kim Rackmiller, and she talks about product, process, people. Mm-hmm. And you start out, you're a junior engineer, all you have is the product you're producing. Right? You're typing on the keyboard, you're adding value. You're not typing on the keyboard, you're not adding value. Right? It's completely unleveraged. And as you get to be more senior, you get to be a senior IC, or you get a first line manager, then you're putting together processes, operational excellence and talent reviews and a variety of different things which make the more junior folks more effective. Those processes raise the productivity. And then as you get to be senior manager, director, and VP, you spend most of your time on people, like surrounding yourself with people who you trust. And so that was what I did for the last, 5 years at Amazon. And that was an aha moment for me that my job wasn't to do stuff. It was to hire people to do stuff. And so that's first hiring the best, right? And getting folks and surrounding yourself with people who are, you admire and you trust completely. One of the directors who worked for me said, at your level, you have to be, everybody who works for you, you have to trust completely, or else it's a non-starter. And so I took that to heart. So you have to hire great people, you have to trust them. Then you have to give them feedback. And it's not like, did you deliver this thing on time? It's how you're interacting with people and how you can be more effective at your job. And those things are much more important than did you deliver this thing on time? Because by the time you're a director or a VP and you're working for me, you can deliver stuff. Like you have the technical skills, you have the ability to deliver results. And then equally as important and a little more controversial is performance management. Like if you have people who aren't doing their job well, you have to move them out. Right. You have to give them an opportunity, you have to coach them. But if that doesn't work, you have to move them out. And it's not only good for you, good for me, not only good for the organization, it's good for the person. Right. Because it's no fun to work at Amazon or anywhere else if you're not doing a good job. And I've seen people whose health suffered, who are bent over, and then we have a conversation, and they leave, and you see them on the street 2 weeks later, and they're an inch taller, and they're happy, and they find something that they're good at, and so that helps that person, but it also builds strong teams, and that's something that it's a very taboo subject to talk about, but it's very important to both hire the best and then fire the worst, or not to be flippant, because it is important that you're respectful to people, but all three of those things, hiring, coaching, and then performance management, are super important to building a strong team.
Great. So what I get a cue from is you actually thought a lot about autonomy, right? When you spoke about, hey, you wanted to give freedom for people to think. So I think even when you're having a conversation about why they should not be part of the organization, you're giving them the autonomy to say, look at things outside, right? So I think that's brilliant. That's a brilliant leadership principle. Is this your own, or is it part of the leadership principles of Amazon?
It is not a part of the leadership. This is something I came to,
Sure.
and obviously, I'm sure what I found often is that I'm like, I figured this out, and people had been telling me that for 10 years or 5 years, and I just wasn't listening, and so I had to figure it out on my own. But the last thing you want is people to do exactly what you tell them to do.
Correct.
Like, because you don't know their job as well as they do. I have people on my team. Every single person on my team are better at their job than I am at their job. And what I'm very good at is making them feel good about their job and helping them have space to do their job. And I found that's made me more effective as a leader. There is an argument that says, hey, even as a leader, as a VP, you should be getting down in the details.
Mm-hmm.
And my boss has given me that my boss at Amazon gave me that feedback not infrequently. And so I have to balance, like, the things I like to do, the things I'm good at, as well as the things that need to be done. And it turns out I can go be a TPM. Mm-hmm. I can be a very highly paid TPM and go drive projects. And I don't think it's the best use of my time. It's not my favorite thing to do, but it's fun to do for a while. But if one example I have is we had a project called Auto Check Weight, where we weigh all the products going out the door. And if it doesn't weigh what we think it should weigh, we kick it out and have a human look at it. And it wasn't working well. And I was getting some feedback from my boss and his boss and his boss. Why isn't this working? And so I went to the guy on my team who owned that and said, hey, we need to fix this. I'm getting yelled at. We need to fix it in the next couple of weeks. And Rajesh said, oh, I've got this 18-month plan to do this. And I was like, no, not 18 months, 18 days. Wow. And here's what you need to do. You need to do this and this and this. And we made a ton of progress in 3 weeks. And then he quit. And by the way, we're still friends. I've talked to him recently, and I apologized. I said, look, this has always weighed on me that I did that, that I took over your job and it made you feel like you didn't have autonomy. But from that, I learned that I can go do his job, but like, that's no fun for him and it's not fun for me.
Right.
And so, I have to say, this is what I need done. Come back to me with a plan. It's much more effective than me saying, do this, do this, do this.
Sure. No, I love the entire concept. But Dave, if you look at it in a completely different direction, so technology, on the other hand, proposes of making sure that you innovate and have lesser people working on stuff. Whereas, you're talking about product and, you said people, processes. How does the two go together? Because it's a paradox, right? When you're looking at technology innovations, you're looking at lesser number of people. On the other hand, you're advocating that we need more people doing good stuff. So how does this work?
Well, here's my mental model.
Mm-hmm.
Is when you're small, you want to turn your fixed costs into variable costs, right? You can't hire software developers, so you put people on it. And as you scale up, those variable costs get bigger. When you are big, you want to turn variable costs into fixed costs.
Right.
And what are variable costs? They're FC employees, they're buyers in the system, they're humans, there's also software that you buy from vendors. All of those things are variable costs. You replace those with engineers, which are fixed costs. And so you write the code once and you get to use it over and over again.
Correct.
And Actually, Amazon, I'm sure you've heard this. Everybody's scared. Oh, the robots are going to take our jobs. Right? When we built the Kiva robots, it turns out that every single fulfillment center that we put robots in had more people working at it after the robot started than before the robot started.
Oh, okay.
Because we had more volume and we were doing more. And when we built automated pricing or built automated inventory ordering, we hired engineers to do that. And the buyers, the inventory buyers or the vendor managers, they found, what happened was the best of them found new things to do, right? They went and negotiated with vendors and they did strategic planning, and then the rest of them went and found something else to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't think of anyone who lost their job because of this.
Got it.
It turned out that we were growing so fast that we sort of slowed down the pace of hiring of these variable folks. But we were growing faster because we were setting prices correctly and we were ordering the amount of inventory. Mm-hmm. And so no one was asked to leave. The people whose job who couldn't adapt to the new higher level stuff they were being asked to do, they went and found something different, either at Amazon or elsewhere. But the virtuous cycle of growing the business meant that you could employ the same amount of people. They were just doing different things, or you were not adding people as quickly as you would have without the technology.
Got it. So, David, just moving away from this specific concept, you spoke about warehouses. So that's a question that comes to my mind. Warehouse management system is an ancient old system. I'm sure when you got in, it was completely different from today. So from a technology perspective, would you be able to tell us how that has changed? How is it working now?
It's interesting because when I was there, in 1999, we went from 2 manual distribution fulfillment center, whatever you want to call them, to 5 automated fulfillment centers. Mm-hmm. And at the time, we launched the first one in February of 1999, and we had 20 engineers rewriting the warehouse management system as we went.
Okay.
And it was like, we need to have receive software done by February 1st because we were receiving product. And then we had to have the outbound software done by February 15th because we were going to start shipping. But that was how fast we were doing. And the engineers were standing on the warehouse floor, like with scanner guns and, debugging the software as we went. That was actually super fun, but, the operators hated it. And they were like, we should just buy something off the shelf. And, why are we reinventing the wheel? And one of them complained to Jeff Wilkie, who was the big boss at the time. They said, Jeff, we've been shaking this thing out for 9 months. And when are the software guys going to deliver? And Jeff said, just 9 months? If we had bought something off the shelf, it would have been years. And you hear horror stories about WMS implementations, ERP implementations taking years and years and years. And, I get to joke in my new job, I own the WMS. Mm-hmm. And I always talk to customers, and they're asking about integrations. I say, look, who here has ever had a WMS implementation that went well? And nobody raises their hand. And everybody laughs. Sure. Who's ever had an EDI integration that's gone well? Who's ever had an ERP implementation that's gone well? Nobody. Mm-hmm. And we actually are pretty good at it because the design principles we are using is simplicity. We don't want to be the most powerful system. We want to be the simplest system. Mm-hmm. And so we can do a full soup to nuts, 8 to 10 map, if you know what that means, EDI integration. So all the messages in 8 to 10 weeks, which is unheard of. That's like a 6 to 10 month project that costs you $250,000 with Manhattan. And we do it in 8 to 10 weeks for free. And our software, a lot of the warehouses we work with use temps. Mm-hmm. And so they've never seen, many of them have never used a scanner gun before. Many of them don't speak English, which is fine. And we can hand them a Zebra scanner at 9 a.m. and they can be picking before noon because the software is very intuitive. And we've made that. We can talk about tenants later, but we always try to have a tenant 1 for everything we do. And tenant 1 of this is complexity is the bane of our existence. Every decision we make has to err on the side of simplicity. And so that's one of our design principles, which is allowing us to scale really quickly.
Sure. Sure. So if I were to ask you this, so that's how the on-demand gets met, because I see that at Flex you guys do a lot of on-demand, flexibility even for your end consumers. So does that really add value to your end consumers when they're looking at the simplicity of how you build this?
Yeah, yeah. So our business is matching shippers, which is retailers and brands, and we work with enterprise shippers as big as Fortune 1 companies. We work with Walmart and others with existing space and existing 3PLs, which is unused.
Mm.
And traditionally, 3PL contracts, they want 5-year contract. They want $1 million up front to put in a bunch of capital. And so it's a very batchy process.
Right.
And so an implementation could take a year, 6 months to a year to do that. And so what on-demand warehousing means is sometimes you don't need a 5-year contract. Sometimes you don't run all the time. For example, if you've got a business that's scaling at 50%, you're building new fulfillment centers all the time, but really you only need them between Black Friday and Christmas.
Correct.
And so if you're going to go spend $200 million building a new fulfillment center, what if you could spend $10 million and just have someone do this for you from Black Friday to Christmas? And that's part of our value proposition. But in order to do that, you can't have a 6-month ramp up and a 6-month ramp down to do a 3-month project.
Mm.
So we need to be able to ramp up in less than a month, get people picking in days and get the whole process from zero to full, zero to 20,000 units a day in a month or less, or the whole thing doesn't work. And so that's something that differentiates us from the Manhattans of the world and the SAPs and the JDAs, is that we have very little configuration. It's very easy to train. It's very easy for the managers to understand what they have to do. And so that is one of our design principles, our core design principle.
Sure. So that's a lot of data exchange. So I'm sure there would be a lot of security and compliance that happens if you are managing this for the end consumer. Am I right?
Well, there's some good news, but yes, that is true. Security is job number one, and we have the third person I hired after I joined was our director of InfoSec, and he is continuously working to make sure things are secure. The good news is, one, we're in the cloud. We use Google Cloud, and so a lot of the things that we worried about with having your servers patched and things like that, those are all abstracted from us, and you've got firewalls and you have some level of denial of service coverage. And then the other good thing is we don't do any transactions. So we don't hold any credit cards. We don't really have any customer data aside from the name, address, and product ordered. And while we of course want to protect that, it's the equivalent of reading the phone book. And so we can we want to keep that encrypted at every time except for when you have to print it on the label. And then we want to re-encrypt it, right? And so you want to keep that data secure and expose it in plain text only at the moment where you're printing it on the label, because you have to have it printed on the label.
Right. So since we're speaking a lot about data here, David, I'm sure you would have seen this right at Amazon as well and at Flex, because there's a lot of exchange of data. And there would probably be, do you guys use, any kind of prediction, any analysis by saying that, at both these ends? Because I think that's where you would be involved.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Everybody wants to talk about AI, right? You can't.
I didn't use that consciously.
Yes, ML and AI. You can't swing a cat without hitting a company that's got AI in the name. Most, there are great uses of AI. Amazon Go Store, AI.
Right.
Tesla, computer vision, AI. All those things are AI. But much of what people talk about with AI are like things you can do on a spreadsheet, right? Linear regression and so on. And so, it's interesting. We are talking about at Flex, hey, how can we market AI? And I'm like, oh, I can build this spreadsheet for you, and we can call it AI. And our lawyers are like, where's the difference between fraud and not fraud? And
right.
But generally speaking, you have to get to some level of scale before you need deep learning.
Sure. Right. So you were saying that even at Amazon, it required a lot more, in terms of data exchange before you would even look at AI. Is Amazon still away from it?
Yeah, so Amazon's Amazon scale,
Right.
right?
Right.
And it's interesting because you really want to separate out algorithms from execution.
Correct. Got it.
And in the warehouse, you just want people putting stuff in boxes,
Sure.
right? And you want people put stuff on trucks.
Right.
And a lot of that is execution, and that's where I live. There's another guy, Jason Murray, who we rose up together, and I always call the Jason Murray does the smart stuff, and the inventory placement and routing decisions, and where do we ship from, and but that's something that we at Flex, that at Amazon everything had some level of algorithmic intensity in terms of the picking and routing and things like that. At Flex, we aren't at that scale yet, but we will get to that scale, at which point we will need to use these more intensive algorithms, and we'll have to go hire better people than me.
Understood. Understood. So here's something that I'm really curious about because I'm in India, so like to understand you've managed a lot of teams back in India while you were at Amazon, and if you remember our chat the last time we spoke about, I'd love to understand how did you work with the team back in India? You're based in Seattle. How did this really work for you? How was the partnership?
Yeah, well, traditionally, many big companies, Microsoft is the prime example.
Right.
They would outsource their support engineering to India and sort of not give ownership, right? It was a job shop. And Amazon purposefully didn't want to do that, right? We said if we are going to have teams in India or anywhere, we need to give them ownership.
Correct.
And one of the things we wanted to do is build big enough critical mass so that you could have senior leaders and principal engineers who can mentor the more junior folks, because that will allow us to have the virtuous cycle of being able to promote people and mentor them and have them rise up locally in the dev centers in India. And so I had 500 people in Hyderabad, and then another 100 in Delhi, another 100 in Bangalore, and then we had a small team in Chennai. But one of the things that I was very proud of is I would go visit. I go 4 times a year.
Wow.
And it's a brutal flight, right? You fly 14 hours to Dubai, you sit in the airport for 4 hours, another 4 hours, and you land at 4 a.m. and stand in a 2 hours custom line, and then we have to wait for your baggage. And so it's a 24-hour odyssey to get there. And to tell you the truth, I hated that. But then once I got to India and got to spend time with the team, they were so excited. They were happy to see me, which wasn't always true in the United States. But they really appreciated it. They had lunch brought in, and they always had Diet Coke there for me, and not caffeine free either. They had real Diet Coke, and they'd have a 6-pack sitting there waiting for me. And I would read documents and give feedback and drink Diet Coke all day. And then we'd have what is called daba. Daba for lunch, and it's what is the spicy food that Hyderabad's known for?
The biryani.
Biryani, yeah. We have chicken biryani for lunch, and so we land at 4, get to the hotel at 6 a.m., sleep for 3 hours, get in the office and work from 10 to 6, have dinner, go collapse, and then come in and 2 more days of 9 to 5, and then the flight back left at 1 a.m. And so we'd stay up till 11, and then we'd go to the airport. And but usually I'd go to Hyderabad, and then I'd either go to Delhi or to Bangalore. And it was great because people appreciated my presence there. And I think I probably told you the story when we chatted the other day. I was walking through the lunchroom in Seattle, and my friend Avi, who worked for me, he said, Dave, this is Rajesh. He's here from India. And I said, hi, my name's Dave Glick. And he said, no, we know who you are. You're the VP who comes to India.
Right.
And so people do appreciate, and they know. That's one of my learnings is that that people are always watching. Correct. When you're a VP, because I'm just me, right? I'm all I am is this guy who I've always been, but I'm not. These people are watching what I do, what I say, and I would always, whenever I go to a site visit, whether it was India or Austin or Vancouver or Toronto, I'd walk around and the team would take me around and introduce me to all the engineers, which was fantastic, but also exhausting. because you're on, and you have to find something like most of them you don't know, right? You've never met, and so the person will introduce me and say, this person does this, and I will have to find something relevant to say about what they're doing.
Sure.
But it's so important. And I saw this from Dave Clark and Jeff Wilkie. They would always have something to say to everybody they met. And so this was a good learning experience for me, that you're the leader, and you get paid a lot of money for being the leader, and you get a lot of respect for being the leader, but it's a hard job to be the leader.
Sure. So that's an excellent leadership trait. And while we have this conversation, you believe a lot in single-threaded leadership. Can we talk about that a little?
Yeah. This is I think it's, to me, it's an Amazon concept, and it's probably not. We weren't the first people to figure out about it, but it's very powerful, and it came out in Bill Carr and Colin Breyer just published a book called Working Backwards, and this is one of the main chapters,
right,
which is the leading indicator of something being accomplished is someone working on it. And there was a meeting where we had a project called, doesn't matter what it's called, and it wasn't making any progress. And the leader said, who is the single-threaded leader on this? And the VP of Europe raised his hand and said, I am. He's like, well, aren't you running all of Europe? But, yes. He's like, okay, so I'll ask again. Who's the single-threaded leader? And the director raised his hand and said, I am. And so, well, aren't you running a category? Yes. And so it turned out it was a junior product manager who was the only person working full-time on this.
Right.
And so, the boss said, hey, I want a single-threaded leader on this. And so I want a director-level person working only on this. And all of a sudden we got traction. And that person got promoted to VP, after a year of getting traction. And so, it's very interesting because everybody thinks they know what single-threaded leader means, and they don't. They conflate single point of contact with single-threaded leader.
Right.
And so you always say, I will always ask, who's the single-threaded leader on this? And someone will raise their hand. And I say, well, what else are you working on? Like, I'm working on this and this and this. Like, oh, gotcha. You're not the single-threaded leader. And so that's a muscle that we need to learn. And so, I always tell the team, they come and say, this is what we're going to build. I'm like, don't care. I want to know who, not what.
Right.
The answer is always who, not what.
Sure.
And so I think that's a very powerful thing to teach, which is like, if you have a smart person who you trust and they're only working on that, they're either going to get fired or promoted, things will happen. If you have shared accountability, or if you have someone who's making it their part-time job, like, I've got 10 things to do. So if thing X doesn't materialize, I'm not going to get fired, right? I'm going to say, I did these other 9 things. And so it lessens the accountability. If you are accountable for one thing, you're going to get that done. When I was a project manager, a TPM or whatever, I guess it wasn't even a TPM, I was a PM. And I had this, my motto was, never talk to the directors. You're just going to gum up your works. Like, the directors are not going to help you. And the more directors you have involved, the less you're going to get done.
Sure.
And then when I became a senior manager or director, I was like, don't talk to the VPs. The more VPs you have involved, the less you're going to get done. And it is true. Like, one of my colleagues said to me, the more functions you can put under a single leader, the faster things are going to go, because then you can make decisions quickly. High quality, fast decision making. And I think there's like a book or an article about Jeff, which talks about fast decision making.
Right.
Like, let's get the data, put it in front of the leader, make a decision, and go. And so the more VPs you have involved, the slower decisions are.
Right.
And you'll see it in other companies, other big tech companies. I talked to one company who was trying to set up a shopping program, like an e-commerce program, and they had a VP of sales and a VP of ops and a VP of tech and a VP of product, and like, that's never going to work. I can guarantee you with 100% accuracy that they're never going to get anything done, and they haven't.
Sure.
And so you need someone who's in charge who can make decisions.
Got it. No, I completely relate to what you're saying, and I really like the concept that you just mentioned. We're going to use it as well, the single-threaded leadership. I'm taking that away as a learning for Purple Quarter as well. So if I were to look at this, David, you are a physicist. I'm sure you use a lot of logic. So my question here is, how did you use logic to build, and in terms of engineering or even in terms of leadership, right? In terms of looking at such a large management of people, how did you use logic there?
Yeah, I know Elon Musk is famous for being a first principle thinker. I think he's a physicist as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so the only laws you can't break, the only rules you can't break are the laws of physics, right?
Yeah.
And so what I try to do is simplify things as much as possible. Say, what is important to me? I know I have to hire great people. Great. I'm going to be single threaded on hiring great people for the first 6 months that I'm in the role. And I'm going to find people to do the other things that I can be really focused on that. Maybe I can be single threaded on two things at the same time, maybe, but it's less good than being focused on one thing. And so, I try to stick on the critical path. And, our business is very deal dependent, right? Amazon's running and it's kind of a machine. Like our business is like, we need to land deals or we're not going to grow and we're going to be out of business at Flex. And so I try to be on the critical path of what is the simplest thing we need to do to land deals and land deals and then execute on those deals. And, the first year it was, we hacked together whatever we could. The second year we started thinking about the platform. And, we would say, okay, if you need 2 extra weeks to do it right, rather than just do it, okay, we can do that. And now we're thinking more about the platform. But when you're in survival mode, it's all about being on the critical path.
Right.
And so that's where I live, is on the critical path. And that's what I find fun. And, people come and they say, oh, it's going to take us 2 years to build that. I'm like, that's can't be right. Right. Let's not even talk about the 2-year estimate. Let's talk about the 2-month estimate. Sure. And let's work our way backwards from that. But, it comes down to, A, having some good intuition about what can be done and what not. B is challenging your people and then trusting them. And then C is figuring out what's important and what's not.
Sure. So if people, the ones that are watching this podcast who want to come and join your team, want to come and join Flex, what are a few things that you'd like to tell them? What would they come and do at Flex in terms of technology? What are they going to enjoy, in terms of working with you? So if you can talk about that.
It's interesting. So we need engineers, ST2s, senior engineers, principal engineers, first and foremost. We also need product managers, we need TPMs, and we need managers and directors and so on. But mostly we need engineers. It turns out I can hire, I have a deep network, and my network has a deep network of directors and TPMs and PMs. And you only need, you need one of those each for 10 engineers. And so what we really need is engineers. And, it's interesting because when I look at are we doing cool software? It's software, right? And I think it's a cool business problem. People who like to have tangible results, who like to move things around and ship software and ship boxes. We love those people, and they love working for us.
Right.
And then I kind of discount. Oh, do we need to have AI? Everybody wants to work on AI. We have those things. I kind of discount those. But every time I talk to an engineer or an engineering leader, I tell them, this is what we're doing, and these are some of the challenges. They walk away and say, "Oh, that sounds like exciting challenges." And I'm like, "How could this possibly be exciting? Because all we're doing is writing software." And so everybody finds their own thing their own things exciting, and the people who think what we're doing is exciting should come. We love to have you all. Right? I've got to hire 40 more engineers. I talked to the CFO, and he said, "Look, we'll find the budget. You just go hire people."
Sure.
Because we know, and we learned at Amazon, and we know that, first of all, we have a huge market. The logistics market in the U.S. alone is $1 trillion+.
Sure.
So there's no end to the runway. You got a great product market fit. Everybody needs what we're selling, and so then it becomes down to execution. And the thing you need to do execution is engineers.
Right?
You need engineers and leadership. And we've got the leadership. And so the only thing that can stop our company from continuing to grow is engineers, or lack of engineers. And that's true with Amazon too. Jeff and everybody else had so many ideas. the global retail market is a multi-trillion-dollar market. Plus Amazon Logistics, plus AWS, plus advertising, and so on. So there's no problem there, and like product market fit is great. Everybody wants to buy the products. So the only thing stopping Amazon from growing is, do we have enough leaders, directors, and VPs, and do we have enough engineers?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if Amazon told me this or I realized. Again, I thought this was a discovery that I made, but I'm sure hundreds of people told me it before I made the discovery. But people run this whole thing. And as much as, we talked about like getting humans out of the system,
right.
Like in the end, you add humans and you grow.
Sure. So for all those engineers who are listening to this podcast, please do get in touch with David because I think he's already mentioned the number of people that he's looking for. So David, would this just be in the US if you would like to talk about which regions you're hiring for? So.
Yeah, right now we are only in the US. We hope to expand over time, both in dev centers and in customers. But there's plenty of work to do in the US. And from a tax and legal standpoint, our lawyers are no less busy than our engineers. And we started out, we were all Seattle based. We've now opened up 20 different states, which we can hire in from a tax and legal standpoint. And so we're really excited about that.
Oh, this is excellent. Good news there. So, David, if you had to send out a message to technologists who are listening to you, who wants to become CTOs, who are wishing to move up the rank, what is one input you'll give them or a suggestion?
So there's two things. One is, do you want to move up as a individual contributor? Mm-hmm. But if you want to move up as a leader, everybody's a leader. If you want to move up in the management track to become CTO, the one piece of it, one smart thing, one cliche I would tell you is the difference between people who scale and the people who don't scale is who they hire.
Right. True.
And so if you're a level 6 manager, your job is to hire level 6 engineers. If you're a level 7 manager, your job is to hire level 7 managers, right? And good ones, not and you want to become a source, a talent attractor. And so your job is to spend a lot of time bringing in the right talent, coaching them, developing them, promoting them, and then also building a strong team by performance managing people who aren't doing well.
Sure. So this is a lot of takeaway for us from this session, David. So I'm going to take home the single-threaded leadership, like I told you. Yeah. The other piece that I would definitely want to look at when you were, it actually resonated with me that, talent needs to bring in more talent. So that's something that I would definitely want to keep very close to my heart. And even as a leader, I would want to make sure that I get more better leaders. You're absolutely right. You need to get people better than yourself in the company. That's how everyone grows. So is there anything else that you'd like to share on the show before we wrap up?
Well, you get to hear my son playing trombone in the background. I don't know if I should apologize or you can thank me to have that. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. I post, I comment, I contact people. So if anybody wants to find me, that's where you'll find me. I think we hit, people is the most important thing.
Right.
Being focused is super important. Diving deep, bias for action, deliver results. All those things are, they will take you a far way.
Perfect. Thank you so much for doing this with us, David, right late in the evening. So we'll let you get back to your family. Thank you so much for being on this podcast.
Yeah, have a great evening or a great morning.
All right. Thank you so much, David. Bye-bye.
Thank you.